All right, what is going on, guys? It's Raul here. Before we get into the video, I just want to say thanks to everyone supporting the videos. They've been getting a little bit more traction recently, and it's pretty awesome getting to feel this little bit of audience and fan base for the videos, so that's pretty awesome. And then if you have been watching the videos and enjoying them, then I would really appreciate it if you subscribed. I'm trying to get to 1,000 followers as soon as possible, so if you're enjoying the videos, a subscription goes a long way. Now, to get into the video, I'm going to be doing a disc review of the Birdie Discs Reach. This is a prototype of the Metal Flake Champ plastic. I don't know what they're calling it. I don't know if they have a name for it and it's just online or something, but it doesn't say on here. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to call it Metal Flake Champ. I know that's not going to be what they're calling it, but that's just kind of, you know, everyone knows that that's, you know, kind of what this plastic looks like, but everyone has their own, or every company manufacturer has their own version of that, and it always feels different. This specific disc, when I got my hands on it, felt a little bit, felt pretty interesting to me because it has a pretty good dome. It has that like rigid edge on the shoulder here, like a tiny little bump up, and then slight dome across the flight plate, and it's pretty stiff. Right now it's warm, so it's not as stiff as when I first felt it, but it feels like it goes far. It says it's a 12 speed, but based on the dimensions, it is a little bit bigger. It's closer to like a 13 speed, kind of like a Raider, something along those lines. But I'm just gonna be throwing it for you today. I feel like it's gonna bomb, but also be overstable. So let's just see. I have a couple discs to compare it with. I have this T-Bird stamped Steve Brinster Destroyer. Sorry if that gardener is making this audio super loud and bad, but I'd say this is very comparable to the shape of this, just because it has that little bump as well. And this for me flies straight with a little bit of flip and a good amount of stability at the end. And then I have this bright yellow Ghost Stamp DD3. I tend to think it's similar or the same run that Gannon throws, but there's no way of really knowing. But it's a really good stability. It gets a little bit of flip up. Will turn a bit if you put it on some angle, but then will fade out pretty good too. So yeah, first throws of the day. Let's get a couple warm-ups so we can get some good throws with these first. A couple putters. Couple fairways real quick. Let's give it a go. All right, so it's definitely stable, pushed straight a little bit, but didn't want to flip even at all on the hyzer angle. Just slowly faded out. I think it's a pretty similar stability to this Destroyer, actually, probably a bit more overstable, but it didn't come out my hottest, so we'll try to get a couple good more throws. We're also throwing into a tailwind, so it's probably keeping it a little bit more stable. Yeah, so similar line, but the Destroyer pops up, turns a tad, and then fades out pretty good. That thing's pretty beaten in, so it probably flies like the Reach, but when it was newer, maybe that Reach is a little more stable though, because I do remember that thing have like a touch of flip up. The Reach kind of wanted to fade out, but I feel like I also didn't throw it as hard, so we'll see over a couple more throws. Now the DD3. This thing should be pretty similar to the Reach, maybe a touch of flip up though. So kind of in between those two. Yep. So a bit more flip up and ride straight, opposed to the Reach kind of just carried on hyzer the whole time. But like I said, I don't really feel like I got that good of a hold of it. So try a couple more throws back and forth and then give the overall summary at the end. All right, I just went and grabbed them all. I did not like how I threw the Reach. Just in terms of power level, I felt like the other came out similar power levels, and that's a good angle to see how discs fly, just that touch of hyzer into the tailwind. So I want to do it again. So let's do it again. Now I feel a little bit better, a little bit more warmed up. Gonna try to throw them hard and try to get a better depiction of how it goes. Yeah, so that was definitely better. I pulled it a little bit and I don't know, it popped up to flat right away. I might have thrown it just flat instead of hyzer out of the hand. Felt like it came out on a little bit of hyzer, but kind of a grip lock. So kind of just like hyzer to flat off to the right, but it popped up, went straight for a while and then faded out pretty strong. Feels like it's gonna be just kind of a good bomber disc. Like you could put on some hyzer and it might flip up a little bit if you throw it hard, but if not, it's just gonna go straight and fade out the whole time. Now we'll try to get similar power with these two, show the differences. Yeah, so you could see that was a similar line, high and off to the right on hyzer. It popped up, turned a lot more and had a late fade, whereas the reach popped up, went straight, turned a tad and faded out a lot earlier. So I think the reach is going to be a lot closer to this in flight, which it was the first time around. Yeah, so definitely similar to the reach, popped up, rode to the right a little bit and then faded out, but the reach and the DD3 both kind of flipped up, went right, went straight and faded out, whereas the Destroyer kind of rode to the right a little bit more and then landed gently. So that reach is definitely stable and I feel like it was fast out of the hand. So now we'll see it coming back into the headwind. All right, so I'm not surprised that this went further than both of these. I felt like I got a good hold of this one, pushed right for a little bit more than the reach, but just felt like I threw it harder in general. But this did go just as far as the Destroyer and was just a little bit more right, whereas the Destroyer was a little bit more left. I think it just started on more of a left line, whereas the reach was kind of just pulled out of the hand right of the right side and faded out. So it's definitely good. It went far with, you know, not being thrown as hard as the other two, I feel like. So now we got a good headwind. I'm gonna try to start it on the left side, put it on a touch of turn, touch of ante, and just see how they fly and flex out. I feel like it's not gonna be like super overstable, but if you give it some air, then it'll get a good long flight. Especially because it's faster, it's gonna wanna tend to tip over right or fade out as a little bit stronger than a slower disc. But I feel like if I just put it on a touch of ante or just flat, then it'll get a nice S-line. Got a good amount of headwind right now. Okay, there we go. So pretty much touch of ante to flat out of the hand, popped up, rode right, but once it started riding right, it wanted to carry out. So it has a pretty strong late fade, but a quick early flip up into the wind. So it could be a good disc in the wind because it's not super flippy, but you just have to be cautious of those angles. If I were throwing it into a headwind, realistically, I'd probably pop it on a little hyzer flip, but I'm trying to work with different angles right now. So here's the Blue Destroyer, try to get it on that same angle. I just hit my bag and we're standing where my DD3 was back there on a hyzer. So I hit the bag into a headwind on the DD3 and it held most of the flight and then faded out. Whereas the reach kind of had a little bit of early turn, but then faded out a bit stronger. It was a little bit higher, so that could be why, but now we'll compare with the DD3. Come on. Yeah, so you could just tell that's more stable. I started it more left, but I put it on some good ante, more than the other two out of the hand. And on a low flight, it penetrated right, but faded out and skipped left. So I tend to think that that DD3 is around the stability of the reach or a little bit more stable, at least a little bit more reliable in the wind. On flat ground, on hyzer, maybe they fly pretty close to the same, but I tend to think that DD3 has a little bit more integrity in the wind at least. All right, so in terms of distance, the reach was the shortest, then the DD3, then the Destroyer, which makes sense because the reach was a little bit stalled, a little bit higher, kind of dropped. The DD3 penetrated but faded out, and the Destroyer was just on a good line that turned the whole time and then got a little skip back at the end. So definitely makes sense. The reach definitely isn't super flippy. It held over a bit, but then had some good fade. So let's try it out on like a hard, almost spiky hyzer angle, a lot of hyzer, and just see how they push. So I'm just gonna throw these hard here and see what they do. Yeah, so that could be a good disc for that because it's a little bit faster in the air. It's gonna wanna penetrate more when it's high and on hyzer. Opposed to these, they're just a slightly smaller rim, so naturally they're not gonna go as far if you're getting the right arm speed. But since it does have a little bit of flip up, it could make up for that distance, but you don't necessarily want a disc that can flip up in these types of shots. So let's just kind of see how it flies. Yeah, see, I'm pretty sure that Destroyer went a little further, but it flipped up a bit. And if you're playing a hole where you need the consistent fade, or if we were coming back into the headwind, then that reach would be a little bit more reliable. I'll go DD3. Same thing, the DD3 got a little bit more flip up than the reach. The reach kind of pushed straight and wanted to fade out a little bit harder, whereas the DD3 flipped up, went straight, and then had a little bit of a softer fade. All right, so the DD3 went the furthest, then the Destroyer, and then the reach, but the reach really wasn't off by the Destroyer by much, maybe 10 feet or so, 10, 15 feet, but it never wanted to flip up or do anything funky. So if you have something like OB right, or you're trying to throw over a tree and you need it to get back, it could be a better option because it's a little bit faster. It's gonna push straight and then have a little bit more of a consistent, reliable fade than something that flips up a little bit. So it definitely could be a good option. It's a fast, stiff distance driver that seems like it gets relatively effortless distance. When you throw it hard, you don't have to crank it over and you're not doing crazy hyzer flips on it. So it definitely could be a good option in the bag. To me, it seems like more of like a golf course disc where you throw it on hyzer and kind of put it out there, or you put it flat and let it swing back in, opposed to like on a disc golf course where you have to shape lines. Seems a little bit touchier when you put it on angles because it's a little bit faster. But if you're setting it on a hyzer or an anhyzer that just pans over the whole time, then it could be really useful. So we'll just throw it on some forehands and then wrap it up. We got a little bit of headwind. I'm gonna try to put this on a touch of hyzer and keep it on a relatively level plane. So let's see if I can throw some good forehands today. It feels like it could bomb on a sidearm. Oh. All right, well, I threw it horrible, but it was on hyzer into the headwind and it never wanted to pop up or do anything funky. It wanted to fade out the whole time and seems consistent. So it could be a good disc for, like I said, more open courses. If I need a big, longer distance sidearm, it feels good in the hand. Sometimes I've messed around with like a nuke or something, but the rim on those are like too big for the forehand almost. So that could be like a good middle ground for something that pushes and gets distance and is still overstable. I'm gonna try to put these on a closer angle to that opposed to trying to throw them flat so I could actually get a comparison. Yeah, so it wasn't like a great example of it, but the Destroyer did pop up a little bit. So if I needed something to swing and not turn over, then you could just see that extra stability in the reach. This is a really good stability for my forehand because it gets that straight push that you sometimes want for extra distance, but it doesn't flip over. However, if I wanted like a consistent fade, I probably wouldn't throw this disc. Or like a reliable fade with OB left or something, like if I just needed a pure hyzer shot, I'd probably be more likely to go to something like that reach or like kind of that boss slot if it's a longer distance. I don't even have that slot in my bag right now, but sometimes some courses I do bring it out. But this is better for like distance sidearms where I could use a little bit of turn or a little flip up. So you can see on that one, I started it left really high, but it did flip up and get a big wide glide out of it. Whereas the reach probably would have just kind of gone up and faded right and pushed forward a little bit faster. It's kind of just a little bit no nonsense disc versus the Destroyers have a little bit of nonsense, a little bit of flip up, potential turnover. So that could be the benefit of it on a sidearm. All right guys, I had to escape the lawnmower because it was loud and kept getting in my shot, so wrap it up over here. But yeah, that's the reach. I would say it's a little bit faster than the Destroyer and the DD3, so it has those fast disc characteristics. So if you're throwing it into a headwind or if you're throwing a good amount of anhyzer, it's gonna probably wanna turn a little bit more and either burn a little bit more or come out of it faster, opposed to any slower disc. If you put it on that anhyzer angle or throw it into a headwind, it's probably gonna wanna stay a little bit more linear and not have as touchy as a flip or release or hyzer point. So that's kind of the downside of throwing a faster disc, but the upsides are it has higher distance potential if you have that arm speed. And if you throw it on hyzer and flat and you're a good hyzer to flat thrower, then naturally it should go further because it has a wider rim and you're not really messing with those flip points because it's just fading the whole time. So if you have a wide open fairway and you need some distance, you're gonna be better off going with a faster distance driver. And like I said, to me, this is a good middle ground in between like a Nuke or a Ballista or something that has a massive rim that's like almost hard to grip, and a Destroyer, because it still gets that good distance of a faster distance driver, but it's not as wide of a rim, and it's just gonna be a little bit easier to control while still getting that extra distance. So that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one.